Welcome, everybody, to this live edition of Seahawks Forever, powered by BetUS on Halloween. Happy Halloween. My good friend Jake Ellenbogen is going to be joining me today. He creates content and covers the LA Rams. You've seen him on the show before. He's got great insight. We're going to take a look ahead to this game, a game that is pivotal. Okay, happy Halloween again. Pivotal for both teams, maybe more so for the Seahawks. The Rams coming in off a bye, red hot, healthy, not looking good for the Seahawks. But we're going to get Jake's thoughts on how that team's playing, how he expects them to play, and what he sees from the Seahawks. His thoughts on a couple of players on each roster as well. There's some really interesting matchups as we get into this edition, this preview of the Seahawks and Rams coming up next on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Seahawks 1.5 point home underdogs this week. Head on over to BetUS if you want to get in on some of that action. All the prop bets are up as well. And right now, if you sign up for a new account, they will give you a 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, 125% on your second and third deposits up to $2,000. Use the promo code YouTube150 to get started. All right, let's get right to it. Let's bring Jake in here. Good to see you again, buddy. And sorry about the baseball thing. For those of you who don't know, Jake is a Yankee fan as well as a Rams fan. And not only did he have to Netflix in the same week that Netflix drops the documentary about the 2005 thing with the comeback with the Red Sox, then they go out and lose the World Series to the Dodgers, man. I'm sorry, but at least you have a football game that's looking good for your home team coming up this Sunday to appease yourself.
Yeah, I mean, LA fans are spoiled, right? Because they get the Dodgers win, and I think they have a team here. I mean, I have this team as well, but I think the Rams are very dangerous. I'm just going to be honest with you. I really feel like, and coming into the year, I had them going to the Super Bowl and winning it. I did. Then they had injuries. Did not expect the injuries that they had. But you know what? I think the injuries were a blessing, and here's why I'm going to say that. Because none of them are out for the year. Now you get Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp fresh, right? All those games that would have been treads on their tires. Well, now, you don't have that. Puka Nacua is not going to play a full NFL season. That's going to bode well in the playoffs. And then I just think looking at it from the perspective of you get to see what you have in Jordan Whittington, Tutu Atwell gets more opportunities. A lot of these guys playing reps that they wouldn't have otherwise played, Jalen McCullough, Justin Diedick, who was, USC guard center. And now all of a sudden, UDFA, he's starting on a Thursday night game against the Vikings, looking really good. I might add Bo Limmer, this 6th round center. I just feel like, quite often people look at all of the negative when it comes to injuries, and there's a lot of negative, but, in a next man up league, to be able to see these guys get the reps that they wouldn't have otherwise had, it upgraded their depth. In a way, now these guys are going to be more ready for the incoming trials, because the NFL season, it's a giant, course of trials and tribulations they have to go through. And I feel like the Rams are in a really good spot because they have all these guys that have kind of gone through that. You've had to see Tyler Johnson playing meaningful reps. And now, you can count on some of these guys that maybe you wouldn't have been able to count on should anything have gone south. But yeah, I'm feeling really good about this team. And I said it right after the bye. I said last year they were 3-6 going against Seattle, week 11. And I said that they were going to, pretty much they're going to be fine. They're going to the playoffs. I had no worries about that. And they did that. They ended up winning every game except for the overtime loss to the Ravens. This year, I kind of felt like the same thing. I'm not saying they're going to win every game moving forward, but just like last year, you had that loss to the Packers that you probably could have won if, say, Stafford played. This year, you blew it. You had every opportunity to beat them. Then you have the bye. You come off the bye. You have an ugly win against the Seattle Seahawks, 17-16 last year. Ugly win against the Raiders, 20-15 this year. And then you had an impressive win when your star came back. Star last year was Kyron Williams. This year it was, well, Puka Nacua somehow, but Cooper Kupp was supposed to be the star. And them winning that Vikings game, which I had no doubt in my mind they were going to win, because I thought it was a bad matchup and a tall task for the Vikings after playing a really tough Lions team to go on a short week and play the Rams. But I feel like that just kind of proved everything that I've been really feeling. I think they're about to go on a serious run. I think they're going to win this game. I think they're going to win against the Dolphins. I think they're going to win against the Patriots. We'll see about the Eagles game. The Eagles always play them tough, but this is a tough NFC this year. It just is. The AFC, not as much. The Rams have to know, anybody in the NFC West has to know, you're probably going to have to win the NFC West to make the playoffs. And I think the Rams right now, looking, forward to this matchup against Seattle, a team they've had a lot of success against. If they can win this game, they get that tiebreaker for the time being. Of course, things change, of course, if you lose the next game. Sure. But they would have the tiebreaker over Seattle, and they had the tiebreaker over the 49ers already. The Cardinal game, that was a total anomaly, but got to give the Cardinals credit. They did win a game by a lot. So, yeah, I think right now for a team that was supposedly shopping Cooper Kupp, which I can tell you is not necessarily the facts, and supposedly shopping Matthew Stafford, which I can tell you is absolutely not what was happening.
Yeah.
This team is ready for a run.
Okay, a couple of things here. First of all, to your point, it has been a rough road. The Rams have been a thorn in the Seahawks side, just as the 49ers have been. I think those two things combined were a huge determining factor in the team moving on from Pete Carroll this year. The Rams have won 2 straight, 5 out of 7, 10 out of 14. I could keep going. It gets worse if I go back farther. And I can hear it now. I'm not even going to look at the comments yet. By the way, this episode is live. If you're watching, get your comments for Jake, or your comments ready, your takes, your questions for me and Jake. I'm not even going to look at them right now because I can tell where it's going to go, right? This guy's cocky. He's a homer. Oh my gosh. Everything you said just now, I agree with. Coming into the season, I thought the Rams, and I said it on the show, had the best roster, were the favorite in my mind to win the division, not the 49ers. Last year, you came on the show at the beginning of the season before the two teams met week 1 and were incredibly confident in the team when everyone else was expecting a down year. You exactly predicted the correct win totals for the Rams and the Seahawks. You told me exactly what was going to happen, even after the second meeting, as you just laid out. And you were right. It's one thing to be optimistic about your team because you're passionate about it. It's another one to be able to combine that with objective analysis and be able to assess your team. As you look at this matchup and from afar, and Seahawk fans are frustrated right now because we allowed ourselves to get optimistic about the new regime and some of the changes that were made to the roster in the offseason. And I think where Seahawks fans got into trouble a little bit, and by Seahawks fans I mean me, is we kind of thought that the baseline was, hey, this team won 9 games the last 2 years with a flawed roster and a terrible defense. Couldn't stop the run, couldn't stop a nosebleed. So we hire this guy that everybody was just raving about and had a great track record. We make some moves in the offseason that we thought upgraded some positions that needed upgraded. So that's where your eyesight goes to, right? That's where the line is. They come out and defensively, they don't look any different than they did last year. They can do some things on offense, but there's flaws there. They have the one good win against Atlanta that had everybody feeling good again. Atlanta's a good football team. Proved it again last week. We did it on the road. And it was easy for Seahawks fans to adjust their line of sight and think, okay, it was just the injuries. It was the 3 games in 10 days. And now we're going to get rolling. And then we just lay a turd on Sunday against the Bills that some people have equated to the 42-7 loss to the Rams in 2017 when Sean McVay and the Rams kind of announced, okay, things are changing the guard. We're here. From the outside, what does the Seahawks team look like to you?
Well, from the outside, I kind of felt like that those first 3 wins, because the Seahawks have this reputation among Rams fans that they're kind of the cockroach that doesn't die. They'll never have like a 2-14 season or 2-15 season, right? They're always going to be competitive to a degree, right? At least win 7 games or more. And so those 3 wins, I saw them beat a Broncos team with a quarterback that I don't think is any good in Bo Nix. I don't. They beat a Patriots team that, coming off that Bengals game, were the Patriots good? I mean, that looked like a decent win, right?
Yeah, at the time it did.
But then the Dolphins game, I thought that they should have just they should have won that game by 40. And playing against Tim Boyle and knocking out Skylar Thompson, that team, Tyreek Hill doesn't even try when Tua Tagovailoa is that quarterback. So, yeah, I thought that was, the kind of fool's gold. And then the Lions game, I just felt like those 2 teams, I mean, the Lions have been on the wrong side of that. And those teams, there's always high scoring games between them, I've noticed.
Yeah.
So I didn't think too much of that because, I mean, the Lions might be the best team in the league right now. And it was at Ford Field, really tough place to play. The Giants game is when I was like, okay, what? Really? And then the 49ers game, because I don't think the 49ers are as good as I was, I guess, expecting. And I think a lot of that is because of injuries. The Falcons game was, again, Seattle fashion. They start off 3-0. They lose 3 straight. And then they dominate a team that the Falcons, up until that point, had an argument to be undefeated, right? Yeah. So they had a really good win against the Falcons on the road, 20-point win. And then the Bills game, you're like, all right, what happened? And so I'll say this. I'm looking at the Seahawks right now at 4-4. And I'm looking at the fact that they have to play 3 NFC West division opponents back to back to back. Okay. They have to win 2 of the 3 or they're done. Like I truly feel that, because if you don't, you could say, yeah, the Jets are a little bit easier, but I wouldn't want to play at MetLife Stadium because that's injury central.
Well, it's in December and it's not going to be great conditions. There's other factors there. Yeah.
But then you got the Cardinals who are growing up as the season goes on. You got them in December. You finish out the season against the Rams. That's probably the worst game, I would say, because you have to go to LA to end the season. That could be a tiebreaker, whatever. The Bears game in Chicago. This is a brutal schedule. You still haven't played the Packers yet. You still haven't played the Vikings yet. Not playing the Vikings yet might actually bode well. Maybe I would rather play the Vikings without Christian Darrisaw than play him with Christian Darrisaw. But yeah, that Packers team should be a lot better at that point in the season. I look at this schedule and I think really the next 3 games are going to decide Seattle's season. And right now, I look at the injury report on a Wednesday, and DK Metcalf is not practicing, and Devin Witherspoon is not practicing, and that's concerning. What else is concerning is that they're giving up over 180 yards on the ground per game over the last 3 games, the 3rd most in the league in total rushing yards per game. Kyron Williams is going to eat this defense alive if that's the case.
Yeah, but I think his chops.
But I think, Dan, I don't know if we touched on this before, but I thought when they signed McDonald, they hired McDonald, that was the brilliant move, right? That was the no-brainer. He is the right guy. Understand this. We're talking about this year. McDonald might not make the playoffs this year. He is not a failure. Okay. I see the comment there. Curious what Jake thinks about expectations for a first-year coaching staff. I think a lot of fans expected too much this year. I understand exactly where that person is coming from, because I will say this: when it comes to McDonald, what he did with the Ravens, the defense was stellar. Okay. They shut down Jared Goff. They shut down Brock Purdy. They shut down Geno Smith. But here's the problem for this game. The Rams were like one of the only teams last year to not be afraid to run the football against the best run defense. They absolutely just first 8 plays of the game, they just ran it right down their throat.
Yeah.
And then you go to overtime, scoring over 30 points in that game, and you lose because the special teams miscued. But I thought the Rams did a really nice job. Sean McVay did a really nice job kind of, dealing with the defense that maybe he hadn't seen. And I mean, McDonald really didn't have any answers. So now, with all due respect, lesser talent on the defense than maybe the Ravens had last year. I don't think this is going to go over well. And I don't predict blowouts really with the Rams. I've learned my lesson. They don't blow teams out. They love to be the cardiac kids, make it like a heart attack waiting to happen. Yeah. They'll have games where they should be blowing teams out and somehow the team will be right in it. But I think as far as like the long-term here, McDonald is the right choice. He's going to get this thing figured out. They got a good roster. Okay. That's why I don't want to say that the fans expected too much, because I feel like they have a good roster. They got a good head coach. I like the direction they went in. They went out and got, a better offensive coordinator, because Waldron, we do not claim Waldron. But, all jokes aside, right, I thought Grubb was a huge upgrade, truthfully. And Geno Smith is throwing it all over the yard. Okay. I think a lot of people are blaming Geno, when reality, I think Geno is doing as much as he can.
It's just the easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Don't know how to evaluate, wins and losses outside of how the quarterback performs. It's all his fault. So
absolutely. So I think actually the real issue when I watched Seattle is that there's like no run game to speak of. I know you have Kenneth Walker, but the run game either gets abandoned when he's running well, or he doesn't get the blocking he needs. And then you're asking Geno Smith to carry the entire load of the offense. See, you can say what you will about any quarterback in the league. I mean, hey, Jameis Winston looked really good last week. Jameis Winston all Chubb back. Okay. Nick Chubb is a threat on the ground. Teams have to respect that. It opens up other opportunities. Kyron Williams doing what he does now opens up opportunities for Stafford, who, I mean, we've seen it. He can make any throw on the field, right? So I think right now, the reality of the situation is that Seattle can turn this thing around. They have to win this weekend. But if they don't win this weekend, then they need to win the next 2 games. They have to win 2 of the next 3 against NFC West opponents to save their season. And I feel like right now they're just not going to do that, because I look at, they're asking Geno to carry the offense.
Yep.
DK is not healthy right now. Witherspoon's not healthy right now. The defensive line, they can't get a stop. They just can't. They're giving up, like I said, 180 plus over the last 3 games alone, and the 3rd most rushing yards. I think having that many glaring needs, and then also Geno's he doesn't have great protection either.
No.
So over the course of time, as you saw with Russell Wilson, you have to worry about Geno's safety. Is Geno going to make it through this year? And that's why I'm just not, I'm not out on the Seahawks, but they are the least confident. I'm least confident in them of any team in the NFC West right now, because they have some major concerns. Like the Rams couldn't stop the run. The Cardinals would abandon the run at will, and the 49ers couldn't stop the run. And since I've seen the 49ers get better about stopping the run, I've seen the Rams take a huge stride in stopping the run, and I've seen the Cardinals actually be willing to run the football. So something has to change here, but I don't think it's through the trade deadline. I've seen a lot of people say, well, just go out and get Dexter Lawrence. First off, he is a franchise player. The Giants would be dumb to move on from him. So he's not available.
Right.
But secondly, I don't think it's as simple as you go and get a player. Something has to change. You might have to change the way you run your defense. And this is up to a rookie head coach. If McDonald's sitting there and he's like, yeah, maybe this isn't working. Okay, then sell out to stop the run. More run blitzes, right? Try and mix things up. Like, you can't keep doing the same thing. If it's not working, you have to make adjustments. That is the NFL. And right now, they could be going, and we'll see if Christian McCaffrey comes back, but they could be going up against Kyron Williams, right? Jordan Mason. Then you have James Conner, Breece Hall, James Conner. Then you have Josh Jacobs, okay, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Swift, and Kyron Williams.
I got to play this in the background. This is scary. This is scary stuff.
Like, there's no break there, man. Like, that's brutal, you know? And I mean, then again, you know,
Tyrone, and nothing you're saying isn't true. And I think it's really good perspective and something that hopefully I'll remember Sunday if it doesn't go the Seahawks way, that, you know, man, if they lose that game, especially if it's just not close, if it looks like the Bills game where it's just discombobulated, we're getting this already. I mean, this is just a tiny, tiny little sampling of tweets. There's people that already want to
come on, man.
Stuff, right? But if they lose that game going into a bye and you have to sit on that for 2 weeks, man, everything is going to be doom and gloom and the sky falling. But to your point, and I especially appreciate this when it comes from people that, you know, that have affiliations with other teams, it's important perspective. When you look at, because of the division, you look at the NFC West, and even in a worst case scenario, you lose that game. At worst, coming out of the bye, you're 2.5 games out with 7 to play. There will still be an opportunity, and you get the week to try to fix some things. So it's interesting to hear you to give that kind of perspective. And it does seem like if there's any team there's a couple others, but my point is that this is about as bad of a matchup as the Seahawks could have right now with the way they're playing, because of the commitment to running the football and Kyron Williams' running style. Even with the injuries on the offensive line, doesn't seem like it slows down that offense at all. Stafford throws for 4 touchdowns last week. Talk to me about that defense, because, you know, a lot of Seahawks fans I know were celebrating and applauding when Aaron Donald retired. They thought, okay, now it's our turn. This defense, I liked everything they did in the draft. Loved, you know, a lot of the guys that they ended up drafting were guys that I had and mocked numerous times of the Seahawks. Jared Verse was probably my second preferred choice to Byron Murphy at that spot that they took him. I mean, Verse was a guy that I really, really liked and thought would be a great fit. And his tenacity and his attitude and spirit he plays with and the physical nature of his game, I kind of wonder if he might have been a better fit for what this defense needs right now than what Byron Murphy is giving him. But I looked at this roster and this 2 deep, and based on my math, correct me if I'm wrong, 8 of the starters on defense have 2 years or less experience in the NFL. And Bobby Brown's in his 4th year. Like, he's the grizzled veteran, right?
And he's the youngest.
It's incredible how young they are. But yet they're wreaking havoc. They caused problems for Kevin O'Connell and that Vikings defense last week. And how good is Jared Verse?
Oh, man. You know, they're better than last year. And I'm not going to say Aaron Donald doesn't come back either, because I know that there are some rumblings about that. But I don't think they need him.
He hasn't done the thing where he's down to 230 now and he's all skinny. And
no. Well, he was playing at 250, to be fair, last year. So
that's crazy.
I know. He's just full on just muscle. It looked ridiculous. But no, I think what's kind of funny, and I don't know if you know this, but I'll let you in on a little secret here. The Rams preferred Byron Murphy. As a matter of fact, they tried to trade up to get him.
Yeah, that came out not too long ago.
They tried to get Bowers. They wanted Bowers. They tried 4 times. Did not work. Teams would not trade out of their spots. And then they tried to get, Byron Murphy. This was just not a draft. I think a lot of teams were very set in their ways in this draft. They did not want to move around. So the Rams stayed at 19.
Yeah.
And there were some people that said, oh, just trade down. It's been a bust. And then Jared Verse falls to 19. The cool thing about Jared Verse is, I'm in the Albany, New York area, and Jared Verse went to UAlbany. So that was really cool because then I watched him transfer from Albany to Florida State, and become just a maniac. But I didn't expect this. Jared Verse was not my top pass rusher. That was Chop Robinson. But Jared Verse already is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Already. I mean,
and maybe one of the best trash talkers in the NFL.
Oh my God.
Some of that mic'd up stuff. Yeah.
That mic'd up stuff was great. That was great. There was one where Byron Young, his teammate, goes, yeah, man, Puka, he's talking about like watching Puka on TV last year, and he's like, oh man, he looks so different like in person and everything. And Byron Young's like, yeah, I was his teammate last year, and he's like, I know. I was just saying, like, it was like this funny, awkward dialogue. No, he's very well liked. I can tell you that right now. It's not just his play. He's very well liked. But Jared Verse, the thing about him is that he has 32 pressures. Okay. He's only played 7 games. So Jonathan Grenard's played 7. He has 43. But Jonathan Grenard is the entire pass rush of the Minnesota Vikings right now, outside of the blitzing. So Jonathan Grenard has 43 and 7. But you look at these guys that are around him, and I have the list in front of me for Jared versus 32. Josh Hines Allen in one more game has 32, right? Brian Burns in one more game is 31. Like, he's among the best. Khalil Mack in 7 games is 27, right? Max Crosby in 7 is 26. Like, we're talking about like a special player. And the big thing for the Rams was that they pivoted. They really wanted Brock Bowers, and you could see Brock Bowers in this offense, and they have the best offense in the National Football League. He's the best tight end in the league right now. He is. So I definitely understood the vision, and I actually was for it. But you stand pat and you draft at 19, which they've never really had success picking a player at 19 in their history. But then they end up with Jared Verse. And I don't know why the Vikings took the other guy, Dallas Turner. I didn't think Turner was better at all than any of those top guys. I thought he had he's very green, I will say that. But my issue is when you talk about that, you talk about the ceiling. Is his ceiling going to be better than what Jared Verse is right now? I don't think so. And that's the issue. So, yeah, the Rams pivot away. They can't get Brock Bowers. So they go after Jared Verse, and then they trade up 12 spots and give up a second-round pick, which they're laughed at for, to get Braden Fisk. And I'll tell you right now, they said, we're not going to replace Aaron Donald, but we're going to try and get 2 guys to do it. And these 2 guys are somewhat doing it.
It's replacing him in the aggregate, right? It's Moneyball. It's Billy Bean.
There's some of the, that is I think right now, as long as nothing changed over the weekend, the Rams are number 1 in pressure rate. That's insane. Now think about this, Dan. This secondary, and I had a lot of issues with this because I thought Ahkello Witherspoon should have been given a contract this offseason. He played 18 games for this team, and they went out and they signed a guy who's coming off a major Achilles tear in Trey White. Well, now I was right. Trey White is not even playing now. It is Ahkello Witherspoon, Darius Williams, Kobe Durant, who's taken a significant stride forward and has gotten a lot better, and this UDFA from Michigan, Josh Wallace. Those are your cornerbacks right now for the Rams. And since they made this change, and you see it like with the safety room, they were using Quentin Lake in like that nickel star role. Mm-hmm. They moved Quentin Lake back to safety with Cameron Curl. And they have, in their 3 safety packages, they bring in their UDFA from Tennessee, Jalen McCullough, who already has 3 interceptions. He's only played in 2 games. Since they mixed around with their secondary, now we're starting to see that crazy pressure rate is starting to play into that secondary, and they're starting to look really good. This defense has been a big reason why that they were in those games. Obviously, Matthew Stafford being that, but they gave Matthew Stafford a shot to win the game against the Bears and the Packers. Could not get it done, right? Now they're getting healthier. Their defense, a young defense, a rookie defensive coordinator, they're getting, better. They're getting more experienced. The Rams are one of the scariest teams in the league right now, Dan. I'm being honest with you. Like right now, this isn't a homer thing. I watched this team and I said, coming into the year, this is a defense that might not even be in the top 15. But what they're going to do is they are going to be opportunistic. They're going to have those key turnovers. They're going to generate more offensive possessions for an offense that I think is one of the best in football. So now we're starting to see this defense is getting more pressure than I ever could have imagined. And they were doing that while being the fourth fewest blitzing team in the league, right? They're barely blitzing. Why were they barely blitzing? I'll tell you. When they had Trey White out there, they were using a lot of their coverages to kind of hide Trey White, right? They were scheming around him because they paid him the money. They saw it wasn't working, but they didn't want to truly admit that. So then they brought back Akello Witherspoon. And when they did that and they put him back in there, you immediately started to see, oh, they're comfortable with their secondary now. Now they can blitz. And when they started to blitz on third down, they're one of the best blitzing teams on third down. Now it's just really hard to beat them. And what's even better about this team right now is when you look at their linebackers, right? The issue was their linebackers. And Omar Spates, their talented UDFA out of LSU, who was a preseason darling, he finally got an opportunity. And he was shaky in the first quarter against the Vikings, but we saw him really emerge, okay? And he got comfortable and looked really good in run support. And so if they can figure that out, and I know they just signed Tony Fields II, and I think that's a good player. I've always liked him. Didn't really get much of a shot with the Browns. He might get, more opportunities. Jake Hummel's a talented UDFA out of Iowa State. And then they have Christian Roseboom, who's a UDFA out of South Dakota State. It was really interesting because Sean McVay was talking about Ernest Jones, was asked about him. It sure sounded like there was almost some regret there. So it actually leads me to believe, Dan, that they are going to make a trade. I have this feeling they're going to get Devin Lloyd from the Jaguars. And if they do that, that's the missing piece on the defense. I got to be honest with you. Byron Young's having a good year. Yeah. Jared Verse having a good year. Michael Hoyt's having a really good year. That defensive front with Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, Bobby Brown. If you add Devin Lloyd, who's one of the best tackling linebackers, one of the best run supportive linebackers in football, well, now this defense is starting to look like they could be in the top 10. They've really flipped it around the last two games. They needed the bye. And I think during the bye, it wasn't just get healthy, because the irony is that they barely got anybody back after the bye. The whole point of the bye was they needed to make adjustments. They needed to take a step back, rewatch the tape, not on a game-to-game or week-to-week basis. They needed to sit down and evaluate. And what they found was that there were certain guys that needed to be playing that weren't. There were certain guys that were playing that shouldn't have been. They made these decisions, and we're now seeing this team is absolutely scary right now. And if that defense does become top 10 and they do get Devin Lloyd, good luck.
Interesting you bring his name up. He's a guy that a lot of Seahawks fans have had an eye on for the last month or so, especially considering how poor their inside linebacker play was and how much that factored into their struggles against the run. And now Jacksonville seems like they're in full fire sale mode, and there's a couple of guys that might be available. Instead, they pivot and they go out and they trade for Ernest Jones, a guy that you obviously know very well from your time with the Rams. And it turns out, sounds like John Schneider's had his eye on him for a while, maybe even talked to the Rams this offseason. The Rams are reluctant to trade him within the division, end up sending him to Tennessee. So the Seahawks get Ernest Jones. He ends up playing every snap last week, leads the team in tackles in his debut. Tell me from your perspective, watching him there for 4 years, what type of player did the Seahawks get in Jones?
Well, it's interesting because, Ernest Jones was at one point, in my opinion, top 10 linebacker. And how I was told is that he showed up to camp and wasn't the same guy, whether it was the knee, whether it was, he kind of let himself go in the off season. I don't know, but he was not the same guy. I was told that. Big reason why he was traded. Really stood out like a sore thumb in one of the joint practices. I think it was the Texans one. And so that's why they moved him. Unfortunately, they weren't able to get a lot for him because I think this word got out. I think after the joint practice, it got out like, oh, the Rams are in trouble. This guy, he's not the same player. Like, we're talking about a guy that probably at some point down the line in his career, the way he was going, could have been an all-pro borderline player. And it's not me, dumbing it down just because he went to Seattle. Like, I kind of saw it a little bit on the Titans. I don't think he's as explosive as I've seen him. So I think he does have, there is kind of a step back. And it's interesting because, like I said, I mean, going into the contract year, he was totally fine playing there and everything. So I don't know if it's a knee issue. I'll say this. I've, been covering the Rams for a while now, and it feels like there's always something like Todd Gurley, and they don't really tell you. That's the thing. The Rams don't really tell you. The whole Todd Gurley arthritic knee thing, they never came out and said that. That was never said by anybody on the Rams, ever. They never said, yeah, he has an arthritic knee. No, that came out by like TMZ. That's how that got out. So, we never really know exactly what's going on because the Rams like to keep that stuff close to the vest. But yeah, I do think he's not quite the same linebacker. I think he can get to that. I think it was just, maybe a bad offseason, whatever. He can get back to where he was. But that's why they traded him. Still, though, Rams fans were pissed when he was traded. Right. I was pissed because I thought the return was embarrassing. I would just rather have him. I don't care if he's not the same player. What is the point of trading him to the Titans to get like nothing in return? I mean, I couldn't even tell you. 2 years from now, they're getting something is what I remember. It's ridiculous. So
good locker room dude, right?
Yes.
Considered a leader, really liked by his teammates.
Yeah, I don't think it's anything like that because he was definitely really well liked and he was a captain last year. So, this is a guy that homegrown, was really well liked around the Rams organization. And I think, somewhere in the middle of contract talks and maybe not being 100% the Ernest Jones that they were hoping for, somewhere in there is really where the truth lies. Because I do think when you get closer to those contract talks and everything, and, I think that's when stuff like that comes up. But yeah, I could tell there was something off about the whole situation. That I was told behind closed doors, there was definitely something off about the situation. We'll never know exactly what happened, but I have an idea. And yeah, I think, Seattle had to make that move if they're trying to salvage this season.
Yeah. Jerome Baker wasn't it.
No. And, Seattle had to make the move to salvage this season, but the question remains, like, how far are you willing to go? Because like I mentioned earlier, I don't think another player in the trenches is going to figure out this run defense. Like, this to me is schematical. This is a game plan thing. We'll see. We will see, Dan, but I could see Seattle being a serious player at the deadline. But I saw a lot of Seattle's fans almost saying like they would rather sell. Like they don't even want to be buyers right now. I just think it sends a weird message if you go out, you get Ernest Jones, and then you're selling 2 weeks later.
Yeah. It's interesting because they are kind of stuck in that middle, right? And I think there's a little bit of PTSD among Seahawk fans. Some of the trades in recent years involving high picks haven't panned out. Obviously, Jamal Adams, and I think there's a lot of reluctance to see John Schneider being too aggressive. Like the moves they've made so far, like the move for Jones, like the move for Roy Robinson Harris, real solid player.
Yeah.
Let's let me ask you this, because the one thing that the Seahawks have done well outside of Geno Smith leading the league in passing yards is they're third in the NFL in total pressures on defense, which is remarkable given that teams don't have to throw the football against them a lot. They can just run the football, and I fully anticipate that Sean McVay is going to come out and do that. I've just a side note here. I have made the analogy that at times this Ryan Grubb offense, maybe even because, and primarily because, as you noted, that they've just been hamstrung and haven't been able to run the football because that offensive line just isn't good enough, has resembled a Mike Leach offense at times, where he's just like, we're not even going to try to run the football. We don't care if you're going to load the box or play a light box and drop it 8 into coverage. We're still just going to throw the ball all around the yard. We're starting to find out, I think, and this has gained a lot of traction lately, that maybe this scheme, the way that Mike McDonald likes to play, or at least the way he built his resume by playing in Baltimore, it's because he got to play with the lead a lot. He got to play from ahead because the offense was so good there. The Ravens only trailed for 88 plays in 2023. That's a crazy number. So they got to pin their ears back, be aggressive, use those sim pressures and mix and match and all those things that McDonald's known for. Seahawks haven't had that opportunity. They got to do that in Atlanta, and we saw the effects of that. Atlanta abandoned the run, started throwing the football. Seahawks got some turnovers, made it a blowout. That said, the Rams went into the season, and one of the reasons that I picked them to win the NFC West and thought they had the best roster was because of the offensive line. All the beef in the middle with Jonah Jackson and Dotson and Avila moving over to center, and then you've got the really solid tackle play there as well. Had some injuries there. Avila's out. Jackson's out. As you mentioned, starting a 6th-round rookie, Bo Limmer out of Arkansas at the pivot. How's the performance of that offensive line been?
It's been kind of up and down this year. I think the last 2 games, Stafford's had probably more time than he's expected to. That Vikings game made no sense. I mean, those guys played out of their mind. Those 2 rookies, left guard and center, Diedick and Bo Limmer. But yeah, it's been up and down. And the thing that bothers me, I think, the most, and a lot of Rams fans for that matter, is you talk about a Lions team that I mentioned earlier might be the best team in the NFL. And opening night, they were in their den and they came back down 17-3. Okay. Or 14-3, I think it was. No, it might have been 17-3. They came back. There's nobody that thought they were coming back in that game. They did. And then, so they come back and you end up losing the game because, well, the coin flip, defense on the field, you're gassed. But in that game, Dan, they were starting A.J. Arcuri at left tackle. He's like the 4th option. So it's frustrating.
We know what it's like to start a 4th.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Jarrell. It bothers me because, well, I'll say this, and I'm sure you might actually agree with this, but it bothers me because all that stuff about Kansas City and what's his face? Rashee Rice, and how the dude clearly broke the law, probably should have been suspended, at least in the, just given a game or something, right? I mean, at least for now, like just waiting until it's over. He's not probably going to get suspended until next year. He's trying to use the injury as part of his suspension. Like, no. What bothers me is they never told us why Alec Jackson was suspended, and he missed 2 games. If Alec Jackson plays that Lions game, they probably win, right? I'm not going to get into if against the Cardinals, they won 41-10. Yeah. But if they beat the Lions week 1, how different is the season? And so I think, I bring that up because it's important. Like right now, Seattle's dealing with some injuries on their offensive line. The Rams have been kind of, back and forth. These guys are playing banged up, but I think the offensive line is so important. And I mean, right now, your right tackle is Mike Jarrell. Mm-hmm. It's not good. That's not good.
And I'm bullish on Jarrell. I think he's an outstanding athlete for his size, but he played at such a small level of competition. You could see that He just gets flat out beat at times. Like the upside there. I think there's potentially he's a starting right tackle in the future, but I saw a graph today that shocked me. And it pointed out, I should have loaded it up so I could put it on the screen. It pointed out how willing the Seahawks are, even given their issues in protection, to leave their tackles on an island. Like Charles Cross was like 4th in the league at being left on an island, but also Stone Forsythe and Mike Jarrell were in the upper right quadrant too. Like they aren't helping those guys out a lot. It just really, really surprised me. They might get George Fant back this week. It sounds like that's a possibility. My suggestion has been, look, if you want to ease Fant back in, maybe keep Jarrell as the starter, but use Fant the way they did his rookie year here before he left the organization, and kind of use him as a big jumbo tight end, tackle eligible. Let's go with some heavy sets. It just doesn't seem like the Seahawks are willing to do that. Like Ryan Grubb is confident in Geno's ability to get the ball out quick. I think he's still top 10 in the league at time to throw. And that's not all because of necessity. It's because that's his internal clock. And that's the intent on that offense. But it's pretty shocking to me how willing they are to just leave those guys and how often they just spread it out. My complaint about the Seahawks offense this year hasn't just been, look, you can only do so much. The offensive line is what it is for right now. You're not going to fix it by starting Satawa Lamea, our 6th-round pick at left guard, and giving.
I liked him though.
And finally, I do too. And again, he's right in that group with Jarrell. I think there's some pieces in place there for the future that are nice. They're just not. The time is now. And then just yesterday, Mike McDonald finally came out and essentially said that the job now at right guard is Anthony Bradford's, that they're not going to rotate with Christian Haynes anymore. That's a disappointment. Like Haynes, still like his future, thought he'd be ready to go as a rookie starter. Sounds like he's not. But it's hindered their ability to play well early and get off to those fast starts like they did in Atlanta and get a lead, which would change everything. You look at that Bills game. We talked about this before we went live, that in the stadium, it certainly felt like what most fans are describing it as just a 60-minute ass kicking. It really wasn't. You go back and watch the broadcast version of that, or the all 22 of that first half, and it's 4 plays, right? They're at the 1-yard line twice and they fail. Josh Allen kicks the ball forward on 3rd down for 12 yards. They fall on it for a 1st down. And then there's the sack on 3rd down that would have held him to a field goal, and Derek Hall with the stupid roughing pay. The Seahawks should have led at halftime. Maybe it's a different game. If the Seahawks have any chance to beat the Rams on Sunday, how would they do it?
Well, I think
Achilles heel. What's the weakness?
I mean, it's tough because right now we don't even know what the Rams' weakness is. They've fixed their run game. They've fixed their secondary. Their offense is healthy. Their offensive line, I would have said, but they just only allowed, I think it was 6 pressures against the Vikings. There's really not a lot that's going south for the Rams. I think the weakest part of their team are the linebackers and the tight ends. And, I mean, this could be a Colby Parkinson revenge game. Who knows? Depends on how bitter Sean McVay is, or how how salty or whatever. But I look at this game. If the Seahawks are going to win, they have to win exactly how they beat the Falcons. That actually should be the recipe for winning every game. Because if you can put a team in position where they have to abandon the run, because Seattle got up by 10 at halftime, I believe it was. The Falcons couldn't run the ball after that. They were like, even though it works, like we're running out of time, and Geno's making all the throws. So it's like, we're in trouble. We are actually in trouble. We got to throw out of this. And unfortunately, love Kirk Cousins and what he's capable of, but Kirk Cousins needs a run game. He can't do it all himself, just like Geno can't do it all himself. And Seattle in that game forced the Falcons to play completely out of their comfort zone. If they do that against the Rams, the only way I see them winning this game is if they stop the Rams from being able to run the football. Because Matthew Stafford at times this year, even in the 4-touchdown game, will throw a careless pass. And if you pick it off, you can completely flip the game on its head. Momentum is a real thing. I don't have to tell you that after last night's baseball collapse. Momentum's real. It's real in every sport, but football, you can really feel it. I mean, you could really feel it in football. You throw a pick, yeah, you might, get out of it or whatever, and that'd be nice, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes that pick comes back to bite you. Sometimes you're the guy at the end of the game, you're on your live stream, and you're looking at the box score, and you're like, how the hell did we lose this game? But
Right.
you see that one in the turnover column, and that's the deciding factor. So if Seattle's going to win this game,
the Seahawks haven't done this year. They picked Nix off week 1 a couple times, but those were gimmies. Like, he just wasn't ready to play that, week 1. And then they get a couple of picks against Cousins when they were trying to play catch up mode. So they haven't been taking the ball away.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. You have to be able to take the football away, because the only way you're beating the Rams right now is if you take advantage of those ever so often Matthew Stafford ducks. Like, he'll throw a random pass. That's what stopped. And I'm not hating on, I love Stafford, right?
Sure.
But Stafford could have been the greatest quarterback ever if he didn't have that. But he has that. So that's what stops him from being the greatest ever. Because if you look at it, in games where he's absolutely killing it, he'll still have a couple of those throws. And if you don't catch them, well, they're not interceptions, so people don't talk about him. But Matthew Stafford is one of the best talented quarterbacks to ever play the sport. But those turnovers have been key and critical. And as much as I love him, he has those at, crucial moments. No. And the thing before the argument is, okay, he's doing that. No Puka Nacua, no Cooper Kupp. I'm not getting on him. That throw against the Vikings, we can look at it like, oh yeah, they won 30-20. They won despite the turnover. That could have been really bad, right? So I just think right now, if you're Seattle, your job is to take advantage of any of that. You also have to make sure that you limit the run game. If you can stop the run, you can beat the Rams, because Sean McVay, when he gets overly pass happy and you're forcing him to throw the football, well, Sean McVay is fine throwing bubble screens and what have you. And I'll tell you, that's when they get into trouble. You throw a bubble screen on first down, you're expecting to get at least 5 yards on that, right?
Right.
If you don't, and you have negative yards, now it's second and long. Now they know you're not running the ball, especially if it's Sean McVay. So now second down, you're going to try and throw a quick hitter, maybe to a tight end on a bootleg to get you 5 yards back to make it third and somewhat manageable, right? Well, if that doesn't work out, then now you have like 3rd and 12, 3rd and 13 becomes really difficult, And to your point that you said earlier, Seattle, they can force pressure, just because the Rams did a really nice job last week against, the Vikings. It does not mean the Seattle Seahawks can't pressure the Rams. So I do think that matters. I saw in the comments, Jarrell versus Verse will be the key matchup. Yeah, they move Verse around. So you'll see Verse, you'll see Hoyt. Yeah, you'll see Verse, you'll see Hoyt, you'll see Young. I would say insert whoever Rams edge defender is there versus Jarrell. If Jarrell holds his own, that'll be interesting, because that's
they got to give him some help, though. They got to give him some help. They can't just leave him.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. You got to give guys help.
Thought this was an interesting comment. Sorry.
Yeah.
From Dune Moose, we should start offense with tempo. Seems that's how we've had more consistency on offense. This is kind of what I think is going to happen. We saw in the 49ers game, Ryan Grubb and the Seahawks overreacting to their deficiencies and trying to run. They telegraphed it all damn week. We need to get Kenneth Walker more touches. We need to run the football more. We're going to run the football more. We heard that from Grubb and McDonald. They come out on the first 4 drives in that game. They start out, run on first down, run on second down, pass on third down. Not going to get it done, right? They overcompensated. And so this week, McDonald talking about moving on from sunk costs and just leaning into what they do well, shrinking the playbook. and just trying to focus on what they can accomplish now. And the one thing the Seahawks do well, and you mentioned at the top, is throw the football around the field. And as unintuitive or counterintuitive as this may seem, I think they're going to come out. There was a hint, there was a mention this week about tempo. I think they're going to come out and be a little bit even more wide open and just try to lean into what they do and try to get on top early. And as you said, and Dune even liked the comment here too. If they're going to win, if they're going to beat anybody, I think this is the game plan for the rest of the season, because they're just not built to win differently. Mike McDonald wants to be physical. He wants to be able to run the football. He wants to build, as he calls it, a run wall and stuff people up front. They're just not built that way right now. So we have to go with what we have. And I think the only opportunity is to somehow, some way get a lead early.
Well, yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit.
It's the monster.
It reminds me a little bit of Sean McVay, his rookie year, with the Rams. They still had guys like Tremaine Johnson and Tavon Austin on that team. Not everybody on this team is going to be on this team next year, right? This is a new regime and everything. But you're doing what you can with what you have. You can't be that rookie head coach that comes in and says, I want a completely new 53. It just doesn't work that way. Slowly but surely, you'll phase guys out. Sean McVay found the guys that he liked. A guy like Tyler Higbee, did not draft him, was drafted in 2016. He ends up sticking around. He ends up being the all-time leading Rams tight end in receiving. Sometimes that's what happens. Like coaches fall in love with a certain player. Rob Havenstein is another one. They signed Rob Havenstein to 2 extensions. Like, that's what you're going to find, is that at your job as a rookie head coach is, you're going to be in the war room when they make those picks. You're going to be involved when they're, you'll have your say. You'll tell the GM, hey, I need this to run my defense. But make no mistake about it, he's not about to get you 7 guys to, run your defense now. You're not about to get this isn't a shopping list, right? And they're hiring you to do what you can with pretty much what the team is. We're going to add pieces, but the main focus is, can you do what you can with this roster? It's what the Rams asked Sean McVay to do with Jared Goff. There were coaches that did not want to go to the Rams because of Jared Goff. And Sean McVay was like, yeah, I'll take Jared Goff.
Yeah, right.
I can fix him.
Yeah.
So, that's really what that comes down to. Now, I understand, like, he wants to play a certain brand of football and everything. He's probably also realizing this isn't Baltimore. You can get it to Baltimore, right? You can absolutely do that. There's no reason you can't. Like, Dan Quinn went from stud defensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks, to then all of a sudden, not long later, the Falcons are in the Super Bowl. And people want to clown him because they didn't win, and they gave up a 28-3 lead, which was honestly more on Kyle Shanahan for continuing to run 7-step dropbacks in a game that they were up by 25, and Ryder Trader went down with an injury, the right tackle. But they continued to clown him. Well, guess what? He goes to the Dallas Cowboys. Look at the defense without him now. Look at the Washington Commanders with him.
Yeah.
So you have to give it time, and McDonald is going to find what works for him. What worked in Baltimore, he might just completely move away from. Sean McVay doesn't run the same stuff he ran when he was the offensive coordinator in Washington. As a matter of fact, he's never once ran split backfield. The entire time he's been with the Rams, he's never done split backfield, but he did that in Washington. Chris Thompson, Alfred Morris, whoever. Like, he's never done that once here. So I think, like, as you get more experience in your field, you find new ways to do things. And, I know he wants to be physical. He wants to have a run wall and all that, but maybe there are different ways that you have to win football games, as a rookie head coach. And if Geno Smith gives you the best chance to win, that pass, that pass attack gives you the best chance to win, then you got to go with that. Looking at the Vikings, that Vikings game, those 2 scripted drives, because they were scripted, those were 2 touchdowns, right? Rams really struggled against that. Rams made adjustments. So what I would say for, like, Ryan Grubb, for instance, is how do you do the opposite of that? The Vikings really struggled when the game actually became the game. It was a chess match because the Rams were like, okay, Justin Jefferson has a lot of stats. Who cares? He's not scoring touchdowns. When they got in the red zone, they bracketed him.
Yeah.
They had so they had an answer in the scripted plays because they just throw to their tight end, I forgot Josh Riley. I don't even know. The guy that the Jaguars drafted. But they would throw to their tight end, right, on those scripted plays. And then all of a sudden, Sam Darnold isn't going through his progressions and everything as the game goes on. In the red zone, he continues to look for Justin Jefferson, completely bracketed. It's why Jordan Addison wants out because he was open.
Yeah.
Did nowhere. So that's the thing is you got to look at that Vikings game and you got to figure out a way to do the opposite of what they did. And that's a lot easier said than done.
Yeah, I'm just looking back at the box score from this matchup last year. Again, that really wet and rainy game in Baltimore between the Rams and Ravens. It was such an exciting game to win to watch. I remember watching
a Super Bowl.
Yeah, it was fantastic, and it'll be interesting to see how McDonald approaches this. A really big test for the Seahawks, and again. If there's any one thing that I want fans to take away from our conversation here is that Jake, who is covers the Rams, right? It's a big part of your life. You have an emotional attachment to them that you are telling Seahawk fans today that even if they lose on Sunday, all hope is not lost if they come back after the bye and play well. That's the takeaway that I want Seahawk fans to have from this. Here we go.
And the bye week comes at a great point.
Oh, here we go. No, this is yeah, it really does. Dune saying Pete's rah-rah energy is missing for sure. And Taste Bud says maybe you can come in as a guest and do a hurrah type speech. That's not what the Seahawks need.
No.
It's not what the rah-rah is not going to get it done right now. In fact, I kind of think maybe it's a little bit of the opposite. They might need to be drilled a little bit. I agree with that. I'm so glad you brought up Dan Quinn because I made this point on the show the other day. I did some digging based on a hunch. And sometimes when you do that, the information you find doesn't confirm your hunch, right? This time it did. So Quinn was hired late in the process by the Falcons because the Seahawks made a deep playoff run. Wasn't hired until February 2nd. I mean, he was hired, but he couldn't be announced. Because of that, he wasn't able to assemble a staff. He wasn't able to bring a bunch of guys from Seattle with him. He had to piece together a staff from scratch. Very, very similar to the scenario that played out with McDonald and the run that the Ravens made and how he had to assemble a staff. Got off to a great start. They were 5-0, Quinn's rookie year as a head coach with the Falcons against a favorable schedule. Those 5 teams combined to finish 10 games under 500. Then they lose 8 of their last 11. They finish 8-8. They miss the playoffs. Everyone in Atlanta, a lot of fans are thinking, did we make a mistake? Is this guy just a coordinator, not a head coach? But then they get a full offseason together where the front office and the coaching staff gets a chance to align. They make some adjustments, obviously, to the roster. They had some pieces in place, but that roster that first year wasn't great, especially if you look on the defensive side. They had Grady Jarrett. They had Desmond Trufant. They had a couple of guys, but it wasn't by any stretch a great roster. And then they come back the next year. They win 11 games. They go to the Super Bowl. Should have won it. And I think it's an interesting parallel. And I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. Well, I think they definitely are missing that kind of Dan Quinn element in their defense. I do. I think right now, the biggest ise for Seattle going into this game, aside from the ones that we talked about, is no DK Metcalf, because Geno can throw all over the place, but Fant, solid tight end, not quite like the guy that I thought he would be, but a solid tight end nonetheless. Tyler Lockett is not the same wide receiver. He's very, very good, but he is not the dominant, when I watched Doug Baldwin and Russell Wilson, I felt like Doug Baldwin was always open and they were always on the same page and he was fantastic. Yeah. Tyler Lockett embodied everything that Doug Baldwin brought to the table. And now I feel like Tyler Lockett's kind of starting to fall off a little bit, just a little bit. The problem is Jackson Smith and Jigba hasn't taken that next step, right? He just hasn't. And so he needs to be that guy if Metcalf is out. If Metcalf is out, I feel like this is going to be an easier matchup for the Rams because Metcalf can generate a double team. He's somebody that's given them fits in the past. And really, I feel like the best corner to defend him has been Jalen Ramsey, who's no longer on the team. Mm-hmm. So you have to push.
I missed the battles.
Yeah, I know. It was fun. You have to push the ball down the field, though, because like, say what you will, okay, the worry of the interception and then the game's over, whatever, because if you're already talking about not likely to win this game and then you turn the ball over, you're really not likely to win this game. Yeah. But I feel like if Metcalf plays and you get some shot plays down the field, now you're keeping the defense honest. Even if they're incomplete, you're keeping the defense honest. You're keeping the confidence in Geno as well. It's like, we believe in you to just throw the ball down the field. Like, we believe you're our best chance to win. Talk about a confidence thing there. But you need to see more out of Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I think Metcalf has to play for them to win. I really think if they could get him similar to kind of the opposite, right? I thought Puka Nacua was the limited one and Cooper Kupp was going to be the fully ready to go one. Well, it was flipped. Cooper Kupp looked limited as heck, right? But having him on the field, that presence, if you can get Metcalf playing this game, he doesn't even have to catch a pass. His presence on the field alone is going to give enough where a JSN maybe get, an opportunity over the middle or a Lockett or somebody like that. That's the thing. If they don't have Metcalf here, I don't know how they're going to be able to attack this defense. I just don't, and I think it's funny that I'm saying this because this defense didn't look great a few weeks ago, but since the bye, they're a completely different defense. And I just think that, you really got to watch out for that. So those are just my thoughts. Stop the run, Metcalf plays. And I mean, if you can put pressure on Matthew Stafford, any quarterback is going to struggle if you can hit him. So that's what you got to do. I don't know if they're going to do it, but, Jackson Smith and Jigba, though, at some point or another, has to step up. Like, he has to be that guy. We hear all the time how, Ohio State is wide receiver you. Okay, go and prove that.
It's interesting. First of all, Brio on the screen there says, "Hey, you got a fan?" Says you're spot on. And then the comments about DK I thought are spot on as well. We'll find out today. The Seahawks right now, as we speak, doing their pre-practice, some of their media availability with some of their players. Geno's at the podium right now. No word yet on DK. Mike McDonald did say yesterday the plan was for him to try to go today. So we'll find out if he does. If he does, he could be on track to play on Sunday. And then here's the thing that I think is fascinating about JSN. We'll put this up here. There it is. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing. Great, consistent, loyal contributor to the show. Thanks for watching. JSN hasn't really had a chance to take that step. He's not getting a lot of targets. This is one of the most interesting kind of under-the-radar sneaky statistics about the Seahawks this year. JSN leads the team in targets and receptions. It's just that he's not making the kinds of plays. He's had a couple of drops, too, that stand out in key moments. In the Bills game in particular on a third down that might have changed the entire outcome. And that's not like him. It's not what he's known for. He has some of the most natural hands I've ever seen. He's just not making the kind of plays that are impactful and that stand out. He's averaging 9 yards per reception. He's not making big plays downfield. He's not providing those dagger type plays. And that's exactly what DK does. He makes those plays. His plays are impactful. They alter and impact the game. JSN hasn't done that yet. He's catching the football. He's involved in the offense. It's kind of under the radar the way it's happening.
Yeah. So I actually have, I have notes here that I had for Jordan Whittington, who, by the way, if he plays, that could be really dangerous for Seattle. This guy is turned into a stud. Did not play against the Vikings, barely played against the Raiders. If you have him on the same field as Nacua and Kupp, all three of them can block your lights out, and then you don't need a tight end on the field. So that's the problem. But no, the reason I brought that up is because I had it for Whittington, who leads the NFL in separation yards. Average yards of separation, 4.8. So in this list, I see Jackson Smith and Jigba in my notes here, 3.3 yards per separation. yards of separation per snap. That is tied with Cooper Kupp. That is tied with Josh Downs, Tyreek Hill, Wan'Dale Robinson, right? So there's some good names there. Nico Collins. It's better than Chris Godwin. It's better than DeAndre Hopkins, Darnell Mooney, DJ Moore, Devontae Adams. He's generating separation. And I don't think DK Metcalf is... that's the weird thing. And that's kind of like why speed is overrated in a sense.
Separation's not his game. Yeah.
Yeah. DK has 2.8 yards of separation, per route run or whatever. Noah Fant is generating the third most in the NFL, regardless of position, at 4.6.
Wow.
Jatavian Sanders is leading the NFL at 5.1, but Jordan Whittington has the most for all wide receivers at 4.8. So it's interesting here because, these guys, like JSN is generating separation, but you said like he's not making the most, with those plays, right? He's not doing the most with that. Well, I think honestly, it's a yak issue, which is something that I felt like he was really good at in college. So I'm a little confused.
Everybody remembers the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, it's just it's weird to me. This guy is one of the least yak guys out there right now. He's averaging 4.6 yards after the catch per reception. That's like bad, right? Jameson Williams averaging 10.9. That's insanity. That's just insane. Yeah. But that's his role. Where you want to be at, in my opinion, if you're a receiver, AJ Brown's at 6.3, CeeDee Lamb 6. You want to be in like that 5.5 to 6 area, right? Jackson Smith and Jig was below 5. So I don't know.
It's not for lack of trying. They try the tunnel screens. They try the bubble screens. I think that might be a product, again, of the offensive line. When they do get the ball out to him in space, he doesn't have a lot of blockers in front of him. They're not doing a great job kind of springing those plays. It's interesting to hear those numbers. That's good perspective. It has felt for a while like he's, we're all waiting for that breakout game from him. And there were a couple of moments late last year where we thought we were going to get it, and it just hasn't quite happened yet. Maybe DK coming back will help spur that on a little bit, because I think even at his best, and I loved the pick of JSN at 20 a year ago, and I still love him as a player. I think he's a complimentary receiver. I don't think he's ever, if a lot of Seahawks fans here want to trade DK Metcalf, right? They don't want to pay him next year when he's eligible for an extension. They don't want to pay him what receivers are getting these days. And some fans just flat out don't like his game. JSN, you're not going to like what you see without DK Metcalf on the field, because to me, love the player, not criticizing him, just not that number one type.
Yeah, I think JSN, he reminds me of a few players. It's kind of funny. He reminds me of Laurent Robinson. That's who he reminds me of. Who's like a third, I think he's a third receiver.
How about Roddy White? When Julio Jones was at his best, right? Roddy White was great.
Oh, yeah. Well, Roddy White was one of the better receivers in the NFL.
He was the second dude, and his game wasn't Julio. It wasn't going up over the top and beating guys on 50-50 balls. It was doing the dirty work. Or to use a Seahawks example, he was, I think JSN is very, very reminiscent to me of Bobby Ingram. Again,
oh yeah,
there was one season he had to be the number one because Darrell Jackson got hurt and there were some other injuries, and he had almost 100 catches and a bunch of yards and touchdowns, but he was never going to be that dominant number one guy. I think JSN is more in that mold.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. I don't think JSN's ever going to be a number one. I think you might see, like, that's what I don't understand when people want to move on from DK Metcalf. Like, what's your plan? Is to make JSN the number one receiver? You're fine with Lockett? I mean, I think they have to upgrade in general. And, I thought Jaden Reed was like the perfect fit for their offense, and they didn't draft him for whatever reason.
I liked him.
I see what he's doing in Green Bay, and I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. But Yeah, I thought Jayden Reed was I thought he was going to be a Seattle Seahawk. I mocked him there. I thought that was a really good fit. I thought he would be a perfect replacement for Lockett. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I could also see, at some point they go after T. Higgins. I think that's the only way. Like, if you move on from DK Metcalf, do you go into the T. Higgins bucket? Because my issue with T. Higgins are the injuries. If T. Higgins stays healthy, I mean, he could absolutely take over the NFL. But yeah, that's been the issue, is that he's not been healthy as of late. It's almost like, I understand you want to get paid, dude, but read the room. He's been playing hardball with the Bengals, and it's he's always hurt. Yeah. I mean, they're talking about him again that he's banged up. So yeah, I think if your plan is to move on from DK Metcalf, you need a guy with that similar play style. I think that people don't like his game. That game allows Geno Smith to, and I think he has some pinpoint accuracy in him, but it allows him to be generally accurate and not pay for it.
Yeah.
That's what I think. So, I mean, if I was running a team and I could pick my wide receivers would be complementary to everybody. So I wouldn't just have three of the same guy. I would have a diversified receiver room. I'd have a guy that could go and high point the football, go up there, win that 50-50 ball, turn it into a 80-20 ball. I'd have a gadget guy, probably number 4, that you can use on jet sweeps and, just totally take the top off the defense. My number 1, I'd also want to be my red zone threat too. So I'd want him to be built, right? And then my number 2 and my number 3 guys, those guys could be interchangeable. I'd want those guys to be able to block. I'd like those guys to be able to work on the outside, on the inside. But yeah, I don't understand, I guess, the not wanting DK Metcalf back.
Yeah, neither can I. I mean, this is a Rams guy, you guys, and he makes better points than some of us in the Seahawks world about the Seahawks. I love your point about the receivers too. It's like building a basketball team. I've made that analogy before. You don't want 4 of the exact same kind of dudes, for sure. And yeah, you trade DK Metcalf, I guarantee you, and this El Nino makes this point. You think it's bad now. Let's see what happens if you don't have DK. If you trade DK Metcalf, no matter what you get for him, even if you get a 1, right? The fan base will then turn around and start clamoring for going to trade, signing a T. Higgins or trading for a guy, someone else that you're going to have to pay anyway. I just look, at the end of the day, my philosophy is if you have a good player, you try to keep him. And
absolutely.
DK is a guy I want to keep, and I don't give a shit. I don't care how much he's paid as long as you make it all work together. Salaries mean nothing to me. Man, it was good to have you. It's always good to have you. I wish I felt better about this matchup on Sunday and we could butt heads a little bit more, but I pretty much agree with just about everything you said. It's just not a good matchup at this time for this team where they are right now. I hope I'm wrong. There would be nothing better for this team and this organization than to find some way to win this game. I don't care how they do it, right? An ugly win. Somehow, some way you come out with 1 more point than the Rams. It would completely change the scope of this season heading into the bye. I just think it's unlikely to happen. And as much as I really appreciate the folks over at BetUS for sponsoring this live feed and this channel, I would not put any of my own money on this game unless if I was, I guess the point I'm trying to make, it would probably lean on the Rams. I just don't like the matchup.
Kyron Williams is who I'd put my money on, because you never know. You just never know how a game's going to go. But Kyron Williams has been a model of consistency, and against a team that just struggles to defend the run, I just have to assume he's going to have a huge game. And, to add on to the point, Dune had us fans are fickle. We follow the game emotionally. What have you done for us lately? Is our MO. I don't want to get too much, because I really want to make this clear. I don't understand why Seattle fans wouldn't want DK Metcalf, but I don't want to make it exclusive to Seattle fans. There are Rams fans that every single week want Blake Corum to carry the ball more than Kyron Williams. I mean, Kyron Williams is
always
last.
the shiny toy sitting on the bench. Hey, there's Seahawks fans that think Sam Howell should be playing quarterback. So,
there are. And, it's frustrating to me because if you look at Kyron Williams in his last, I think he's had 18 starts for his career. In that span, he leads almost every category of all running backs in the NFL. More than Chris McCaffrey. He has more yards after contact than anybody except for Derrick Henry. And you know why. So people get so caught up in the measurables and just the size. That's why I kind of laugh at the DK thing, because he's like the perfect, like, oh yeah, he's got the 4.3 speed and, he's built like a Greek god. Normally fans don't want that guy gone. They normally want the guy that ran a 4.65 40, is 5'9", a buck 96, like Kyron Williams. And so, I bring it up because this is just how fans are. It's just how fans are. There are people that were saying that, we should tank for Caleb last year. I made a video that told Rams fans to shut the hell up about Caleb Williams. Literally made that video. I said, shut the hell up about Caleb Williams. We're not tanking. This team's going to go 10-7 and make the playoffs. And people are like, you are absolutely delusional. And I'm like, no, you're delusional. The fact you think Caleb Williams makes more sense for this team right now, the way they're built, than Matthew Stafford. So I've just gotten kind of used to it. Like fans are going to fan and everybody has an opinion, and that's great. I would suggest watching tape before you say something, because if you don't have the full scope of it, you're going to sound ignorant on the internet and people are going to clown you. But I just think that at the end of the day, everyone's entitled to their opinion, but there are a lot of fans, to your point, that get obsessed with the new shiny toy. There are a lot of fans that try to push guys out when they get hurt. They're really quick to say goodbye to them. That could be part of it. DK gets hurt. Oh, Jackson Smith-Njigba hasn't done anything. Let's blame all of his lack of development on the fact that DK Metcalf is there. Now he's going to just magically turn into a great receiver. I think that's really what it comes down to, Dan. So appreciate you having me on. Should be a fun game. I had Rams 30, Seahawks 20. I just don't see blowouts. I really don't. I think it could be like a last drive touchdown at the end of the game. I think Seattle will keep it close, but I think the Rams will be fine with that, and they'll just chew the clock. That's how I see it.
I do think that desperation is a powerful, powerful weapon in the NFL. And a lot of times the team that is more desperate is the one that, no matter how bad you think the roster is, that can be very, very dangerous. If the Seahawks don't come out and play as if they're desperate Sunday, at least effort-wise, and put up a fight, then some of the questions leading into the bye week will be a little bit harder to answer, I think, for Seahawks fans and people on this side of the ledger. Thanks, Jake. Here, let me do this before we go. Come here, buddy. I can't do a show on Halloween and not give my black cat a little bit of screen time. So this doesn't scare you. Yeah, here we go. Then I don't know what does. He's so scary. Hopefully the outcome of the Seahawks game on Sunday won't be as scary. Jake, thanks for being on the show. Thank you to the Blue Wire Network. Thank you to BetUS. Thank all of you for watching. Follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. All the ways you can support the channel are down in the description. Until next time, forever and always go Hawks. Thanks, Jake.
Absolutely.